Hello, good evening. This is Paul Lennon again, and greetings to all of you. And let us begin with just thoughts and prayers for those who have left us, have passed to their eternal reward, and for all those who are suffering from the virus and for their family and friends who are so worried about them, and for so many people that are fearing this tremendous killer that's come upon us. I'll continue. This is tape 9 in the series of my autobiography, and we'll start right in. In the paragraph in this chapter, we're still in the, sixth chapter, Retreating from the World. I have desired to go where springs not fail, the fields where flies no sharp and sighted hail, and a few lilies blow. And I have asked to be where no storms come, where the green swell is in the havens dumb, and out of the swing of the sea. Gerald Manley Hopkins, I believe he's a convert, Jesuit, and poet. Quick passage to profession. In the summer of 1962, so that is now 10 months perhaps after beginning Holy Novitiate in Salamanca, yes, as I struggled through my faith crisis, Father Arome, novice instructor, etc., announced to the chosen 8, first Irish recruits, that because our group was special, Nuestro Padre Maciel was granting us the privilege of taking our vows after only 1 year of novitiate instead of the customary 2. Again, I went through the consultation process with my spiritual director and hours of forcing myself to pray, reaching out to the invisible and intangible and absent God. As part of my preparation for profession, I was able to make a general confession to Father Maciel, who had come to Salamanca for the historic event. I was able to make good. There he heard the short list of my peccadillos, and as I kissed his stole at the end of our confession, I listened to his advice. I could understand what Father Maciel was saying. Adelante por Cristo, which means go ahead for Christ. And I took it blindly. My superior was Christ's representative on earth. If I couldn't see, he could see. He would see for me. On September 15, 1962, so 1 year after exactly, trusting absolutely and blindly in him, I would take my vows, the 3 evangelical counsels of poverty, chastity, and obedience. I also took a 4th vow, the private vow, regarding never to criticize a superior in any way and to inform our immediate superior if we knew of another member breaking this rule. The special profession took place in the sacristy in private in the presence of the founder and superior general Nuestro Padre. There we, the newly professed, receive our crucifixes from Rome, blessed by the Pope, and kiss them devoutly as we took them into our hands. These would be the only possessions we could ever claim as ours. True to that promise, I have kept mine to this very day. I never really had a problem with Jesus as such, or blamed him for my odyssey. I did lose him for some time, few years, in the Legion's arid isolation, but I found him later in the lost world of Quintana Roo, when I was on the missions. paradoxically recovering my fascination for his personality and nature, his teaching, and his works. It would all take a long, long time to recover the little faith I have. More than 40 years later, it is sobering to think my quick promotion to first religious profession after only 1 year's novitiate was not due, probably, to my success as a novice legionary or to my grasp of the religious life, but really it was part of an expedient move by Father Maciel to get the first Irish through the training process, ordain us as priests, and whoop, send us off to the United States to conquer those Americans for the kingdom of Christ. And that's what we did. As you know, Legion history is that first superiors in the United States were Father Ramiro Fernandez, who I've talked about before, and then immediately this was early, what is this, the 70s, I believe? Yes, I think so. And then shortly afterwards, Father Juan Jose Vaca Rodriguez, who was one of Father Maciel's victims, as a matter of fact, um, he took over the leadership of the Legion in the United States. Later on, I'm not sure who followed, but eventually will be Father Anthony Bannon, who was a bastion of the Legion of Christ in the United States for many years. He was the main fundraiser. He was a superior. I think he might have been novice instructor for a while, and promoter of vocations, etc., etc. So an important part. Irish-born, FBI, as the Americans call us, foreign-born Irish, and later on. So these are important Irish men ordained quickly by the Legion, or expediently by the Legion, to to shoot into the United States. To shove, to captain the Legion barge up the Hudson River into New York and the United States of America. Next paragraph is called With Marie Brizard on the Beach at Nice. This might be a little bit hard to grasp, okay? And I can be a little bit facetious, if not very facetious. This is called With Marie Brizard on the Beach at Nice, France. The Cannes Festival. Exciting things were happening in the Catholic Church in 1962. So let me explain in case we get lost. I am legionary professed September 1962. Then after that, I would pass to the community of humanity students. That'll be in September. So very quickly after that, the Vatican II is starting in Rome. So this is a next stage. And this Vatican II Council, a bunch of us, a bunch of legionaries would be present in that. Later on, I would study, because I would do another year. I would do 3 months in Rome that particular year, then come back to Salamanca, do my humanities year, and then go to Rome for my philosophy studies. 3 years of philosophy. I got a degree in scholastic philosophy, PhL, and I also got a full degree, an MA, you might say, in sacred theology, sacred Catholic theology, all at the Gregorian University. Exciting things were happening in the Catholic Church in 1962. Pope John Paul XXIII had summoned the Second Vatican Council to Rome to renovate the church. And you remember the word that was used was aggiornamento. He was Italian, so he could really speak the language. And it's a very sad thing to remember. This gets to me right now. If I'm not mistaken, Pope John the 23rd, he was from Bergamo in northern Italy. And isn't this terrible? That the city that was stricken so strongly by the virus was Bergamo in the north of Italy. This is so sad for us who were fond of Pope John the 23rd and fond of Italy. They were lovely people. This is northern Italy. This is, I think, close to the area of Milan. Maybe, not sure. Forgive me, Italians. Lombardia, perhaps. But Bergamo. Pope was Bergamesco. Bergamesco. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. A pope which was not favored by Father Maciel. Father Maciel would always side with the more conservative part of the Catholic Church, of the Catholic hierarchy. He would kind of be their hero in Latin America. And he was very clever at kind of projecting himself as the protector of orthodoxy, of strong Catholic doctrine in Latin America. And of course, he was only very influential in Mexico, but then he was able to project all of this, and especially with John Paul. John Paul was really big into this. He saw Maciel as some kind of a great knight in shining armor. El Cid Mexicano para America Latina, the great champion of Catholicity for Latin America. This is Father Maciel's charism. There's no doubt about that. The way he could project himself and make himself seem so important and win over people. Unwittingly, His Holiness was also doing some of us a great favor. Soon after taking our vows, as a matter of fact, but we were in the humanities group, we were to travel to Rome and take care of a large group of Mexican bishops staying at our seminary, Via Aurelia 677, Via Aurelia Nova. This was the main first college that Father Maciel had built in Rome from early on, from the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. And let me just plug in here that this was the very same place in the infirmary of that college was where Father Maciel, before and maybe at this very time, it's terrible, maybe at this very same time, 1960, he was still abusing his seminarians. Stuff. Well, we were happy. We didn't know anything about this. We Irish never knew about anything about the sexual abuse. People ask this again and again. How didn't you know something? We didn't know anything. Maciel was so clever, closing the circle of his harem, forgive the expression, that word never got out beyond then. He was able to swear them all to silence. Anyway, they would be so ashamed of what was happening to them. They would be confused, as most victims of sexual abuse are, totally confounded, abused, bewildered, bewitched, whatever, devastated. So from 1962 to 1965, I would travel the Salamanca-Rome route on several occasions. This is very good because it gives you, we're getting into the Legion a little bit, getting into the inner sanctum here, we might say, or the inner workings, the modus operandi, as you might say, the method, the way they operate. Part of the Legion's PR program consisted of plying members of the Roman Curia, cardinals, bishops, and Monsignore with bottles of wine, bottles of liquor, and choice bolts of material. Cortes in Spanish. They love this. What was it? I'll think about it. Special good materials for making clerical suits, I take it. And yes, The liquor was transported by our Mercedes-Benz coach. Days before the trip, cases of Spanish brandy, from the least expensive, such as Fundador, to the more expensive, such as Cardenal Mendoza, were stored in the belly of the bus. Anisettes, too, from the least refined, Anís del Mono in Spain, to the more expensive Marie Brisard. And there comes the title of this particular little paragraph. And so the bus that ferried us seminarians, and we were in our seminary clothing, maybe not. Some of them were from Salamanca to Rome. So long journey from Salamanca up through Spain and through our famous Pyrenees, going into the south of France, Montpellier, etc., crossing over into Italy. So we had to go through two customs, two frontiers. But anyway, so the bus that ferried us seminarians from Salamanca to Rome had its luggage compartment full of contraband, or whatever it's called. Yes. And for the kingdom of Christ. Any suspicious items? Apprehensive brothers, maybe like me, suffered when we came to the custom points in France and Italy, where we had to stop, and officers entered the bus asking for passports. They probably asked us if we were carrying anything that was illegal, and we probably feigned innocence or something. Je ne parle, pardon, no hablo francés, or whatever, and no speak the French. Experienced brothers took it in their stride. They'd been there before. They had done that before because they had been back and forth, maybe from Rome and Spain. Another embarrassing experience was sleeping accommodations. This is where you see that in harmful groups, call them what you will, gently, high control groups, one of the characteristics is that the end can justify the means. No matter how much our drivers pressed on through the night, we usually needed at least one night's rest in a hotel or some kind of a motel or something. One of the strangest was the night at the Montpellier. Well, this time we stayed at the seminary. One of the strange night we stayed in Montpellier Seminary, deserted during the summer. We'd be going in September. Well, August, seminarians would be out on vacation still. And but there was a strange thing happened. The single camp bed that we were assigned was bow-shaped, head to foot, making it impossible to get rest. Had they arched them on purpose to air them? Maybe that was one reason, while the regular seminarians were away. Or was this some kind of strange method of warding off wetting the bed? Rolling into another French city after midnight, we implemented a money-saving strategy for a higher cause. This is what I'm talking about. While expedition leader Father Jose Maria Sanchez, checked in at the desk, asking for 15 rooms for 30 seminarians, the horde of seminarians, pillows in hand, milled around the lobby. As the concierge counted out the keys, part of the confusing throng would peel off, making a beeline for the rooms. In the resulting melee, it was impossible for the desk manager to count the numbers. Eventually, 60 seminarians were able to rest in 10 or 15 rooms. Mattresses were quickly tossed to the floor. Bed or mattress made no difference to hardened legionaries. This deceit did bother me. What could I do? You see, we belong to this privileged group of seminarians with a mission for the world, and we had outwitted them, those ordinary, unimportant people. On another occasion, traveling nonstop from Salamanca, we arrived at Nice about 5 a.m. in the morning. The bus pulled up at the famous beach and we fell out to stretch our legs on the promenade. Walking across the sand, we washed our hands and faces and freshened up in those celebrity hallowed waters. That part of the city was sad and deserted at that time of the day. Needless to say, it was early in the morning and no steamy French beauty was afoot. Our celibacy, our chastity was safe. Not even an old lady strolling her dog. To catch a glimpse of Brigitte Bardot with her bevy of beasts would have been exciting, but my dishevelled look and unusual attire might not have favorably impressed her. I would have to be content with my longing for sweet Marie Brissard, the anise stowed in the belly of the beast. Next paragraph, first defections. This is about what happened in this first group of Irish, of the 8 Irish who went over there. Now we were not properly prepared. We were, going to Salamanca. Now we were in Rome. Everything was moving too fast, and it was kind of natural that some of the 8, would defect. They would leave the Legion. They would take advantage of the Mexican bishop's presence or something or other to get out of there. So again, I'm looking at from my point of view, or from hopefully a kind of a normal point of view. But Father Maciel maybe was willing to take that. What would that be called? The losses, just to take the losses in his stride, because I'm going to tell you, people left. 4 out of the older brother postulants. Remember, there were 5 of them and 3 of us. Now, let me see what I did again. The 3 of us, the 3 Dubliners did not defect, but 4 of the 5 of the country boys, I'm calling them, people from the provinces, they did, may have left around that time, or 3 of them, sorry. Let me see. The casualties, I'm saying, counting the casualties. 3 of the first Irish recruits, Coleman, French, and Allen, left or were asked to leave during these comings and goings to Rome during that 3-year period. Using cultic language, these were either walkaways or throwaways. Kind of brutal language, but it helps you to sober up and to see reality. So in the Legion, like in any high-powered group, high-control group, people leave either because they're thrown away or they walk away. Take your choice. If you're lucky, you walk away. If you're not so lucky, we've talked about it before, you're a throwaway, I'm sorry, brother, but Nuestro Padre says that you don't have a vocation. Nuestro Padre says that you don't have a calling to the priesthood. So get ready to pack your things. You'll be leaving tomorrow. So 3 of those left. To reinforce our perseverance in the Legion, so I assume in hindsight, Mr. Padre later told us the harrowing tale of one of them being abandoned in Mexico. In other words, this brother of ours, he was cajoled by a Mexican priest to go with him after the end of the Vatican session, to go with him to his seminary in Mexico and play a part maybe in the training of those Mexican seminarians. Anyway, it would be nice to have a tall, fair-haired, blue-eyed Irishman working in the seminary. It might be good for the PR, for the Mexican bishops. PR. I don't want to mention, I'm not sure of the names of this particular bishop, but he was there. Nuestro Padre described Brother X dragging himself to the Legion House in Mexico City. I think he said in Tlalpan, in rags and tatters, begging for help, and the Legion magnanimously paying for his passage home to Ireland. The fourth veteran, Maurice Oliver, the one who was rebaptized by Father Maciel, later on, he did not abandon the Legion at that time. He didn't leave. He went on, but he was prematurely ordained to the priesthood around 1968 and left shortly afterwards. I believe he was sent to Ireland, but again, too young, too quickly, lack of proper training, lack of maturity. He left, I believe, soon afterwards, there to disappear over the horizon as is wont, or as was wont in the Legion. The fifth member of the small group was Michael Cahney, who I consider a friend of mine. He was with me, one of the first 8. After serving as a legionary seminarian in a series of assignments for several years, he was one of those that Father Maciel was dispatched to various parts of the Legion Empire, shall we say, to do a special job, a special assignment, etc., etc. And I think he left before being ordained. Became a priest later for the Diocese of Elphin in Ireland, and then somehow became a priest in Brazil, and then eventually got married and had 2 lovely boys. Anyway, what's happening? Where are we going? Yes, that's enough of that. That's enough. So we were with the Mexican bishops, and I was the angel valet to Mexican Bishop Anselmo Salsa Bernal. And then later on, after my year of humanities, I would go to college. I would begin studying philosophy at the Gregorian University, where I would later get my degree in scholastic philosophy, kind of a PhL degree. And nothing like good old theology and philosophy, or philosophical theology, to get you doubting about the existence of God as you studied Sartre, Nietzsche, and Camus. Once more, I approached my spiritual director for help, but he didn't help. I'm going to skip this. The old crisis of faith was still there, always bugging me, always bothering me. I have a little reflection here I want to share with you. I'm saying perhaps my crisis did not need more philosophy or more reasoning. Maybe I was simply searching for a word of wisdom, a true and deeper spirituality, or some personal knowledge and experience of God. Or perhaps I simply needed to be listened to without receiving so much advice. What if I had learned to listen to myself? This would come years and years afterwards. I venture to say that the Legion is not a good place to listen to yourself. Praise be the Lord if some legionaries are able to do that now that I am being told that the rules are not so strict, that things have loosened up a bit, that people have a little bit more time for themselves to reflect. A big what if surfaces now after 40 years. What if someone in the Legion had listened to me, to what was happening to me, to what was going on inside of me? What if someone had been able to help me listen to myself, to go beyond the doubts of faith to the pain underneath, and below the pain to what this pain was telling me? But no, spiritual direction and formation contact with superiors were the only instrument used to train me, to coach me on a daily basis, not to listen to myself, but to them. Characteristics of a cult: questioning and doubt are not allowed. They are forbidden and often sanctioned and punished. And that could happen in the Legion. Doubting, questioning, punishment. You're out of here tomorrow morning on your way to Africa. Africa? Gabon. What's going on? I don't. You have a special mission in Gabon. Or let's say maybe Patagonia in the south of Chile or something. I don't know. Or maybe, what about the Canary Islands? Whatever it's called. Isla Grande. Or, I don't know what it's called. Somewhere where nobody knows you and you're on your own and you're left to, fend for yourself. Teaching me on a daily basis not to listen to myself, but to them, to the will of God, meaning the will of the Legion, which they knew and interpreted for me. From that very first consultation in September 1961, before taking the habit, I was being trained. I began learning to disregard my own thoughts, feelings, intuitions. Like the lobster tail readied for the crab meat, the inner self had to be emptied out to make room for the Legion doctrine. Whether the language was subtle or obscure, gentle or harsh, the lesson was clear. Don't listen, disregard the self. To think, let alone talk, of one's inner needs would have been selfish. Muy egoísta. The constant drone of be generous, forget yourself could always be heard in the background. Decades later, I would found this kind of dysfunctional family described in adult children of alcoholics literature. Jack Keogh, after leaving with us in 84 or thereabouts, he was the one who came up with the first insight, which has been a great light to several of us coming out of the Legion. What was going on there? What was happening? What's going on? Where were we? It's like a dysfunctional family. I have to say now, it was like a dysfunctional family before I'm corrected by those who know better, by my betters, by my present legionaries who are going to say, "Oh, that's the way it was before. That's like the Old Testament. You're prehistoric." What can I say? One of the oldies. But so again, the challenge is, has it really changed? Is the family more functional? Are people reaching out to each other? Are people really more fraternal? And I'm reading in the news today that a legionary in Cancun who was saying some silly things, and he was saying that people should not go into lockdown. He was being kind of silly. That he should not go into lockdown. That people should be going to mass and should be adoring the Blessed Sacrament. Of course, this is all very pious, but it's not practical. Now, to put him in his place, the bishop, his superior, Pedro Pablo, forgive me, Bishop Pedro Pablo, sent out a public admonistation to him, a public monition to him, putting him in his place. And of course, he was applauded for this because really the priest, legionary priest, was saying some silly things and perhaps some dangerous things. But my question is, why didn't somebody speak to him before? I mean, this is a problem that's been going on for some time. He's been gradually going off kilter, shall we say. But my question is to the great charity functional family legionaries of today, was there nobody in the Legion to speak to this man, to sit down with him over a cup of coffee and chat with him? I mean, is there no outreach? Is there no counseling? Is there no pastoral capacity to sit down with this man and say, uh, Father, we're concerned about you. You know, we're concerned about you, and try to get in and see if there's something else that's hurting him, because very often there's something deeper underneath our exterior actions. I mean, that's like ABC in psychological counseling, which doesn't reflect well on the Legion. And I'm going to end here, but that's the idea of one of the things that dysfunctional family. That whole, shall we say, study. I remember, you can check this out. There was a man called John Bradshaw. I think he may even have been an ex-priest, but he really got into this whole thing of recovering alcoholics, the 12-step program. And then, of course, that he believed that alcoholics were coming from that. When there's an alcoholic in the family becomes a dysfunctional family. And then we were finding out that not only in the case of an alcoholic father, for example, was the family dysfunctional, but it could be the case that any one of the family members had a serious problem. The whole family constellation, as we said, would be thrown into a kind of a desequilibrio, disequilibrium, excuse me, a lack of balance. And because of that, then everybody would start acting up these unhealthy roles. And he was on the ball, Bradshaw. But one of the little phrases that's going to help you that he used that characterizes the dysfunctional family is: don't talk, don't feel, don't trust. That was the Legion of Christ I was in. I hope to God it's not the Legion of Christ you are in, or your children are in, or your relatives are in, or you are in. Let us pray for the victims.